Welcome to the Earth's Edge podcast. I'm your host, James McManus. At Earth's Edge, we run guided expeditions with a focus on environmental and cultural sustainability. We created this podcast to share stories from people who have found the outdoors and fallen in love with adventure. Each month, we're giving away one of our summit jackets worth €150. To be in the running, all you need to do is subscribe to our mailing list at earths-edge.com/podcast. There's a link in the show notes. Now, for today's guest.
I mean, that trip was challenging because of the weather, but what got us through it was the camaraderie in the group. You know, we just had such a laugh. We were telling stupid jokes, stories, singing songs, whatever it was, because it was hard work. And I think, you know, that was certainly one of those trips where if the group dynamic wasn't great, it could have been difficult for everybody.
That was my good buddy Stephen O'Donoghue, who was on a trek with me to Machu Picchu and Choquequirao back in 2019. I wanted to get him on the podcast as I love his backstory on how he got into hiking. On a drunken night out, he and a friend decided to go climb Kilimanjaro to celebrate their 40th birthdays, and he hasn't looked back since, doing an expedition each year for the last 15 years. I hope you guys enjoy it. You were telling me that you grew up in Sandymount in Dublin beside a beach. How was that?
Yeah, so grew up in Sandymount beside the sea. Amazing place to grow up. You know, the sea and the wastelands attached to it was our playground. You know, it was an adventure playground for us. And, you know, back in those days, we'd come home from school, we'd dump the school bags and we'd go off and we'd be gone for hours and hours, and we'd come home and it was dark or come home for dinner. So that adventure playground we had every day was amazing. Loved it, really loved it.
Yeah, like it kind of, from someone down the country, like down Tipperary way, like it seems a bit bizarre to me that you were going out doing, like, was it hard to get out in wilderness? Like you were saying the wasteland was just there, like, or how did that work?
Yeah, I suppose, like, the beach is the beach, and we'd walk and we'd play and we'd kick ball and we'd fish and we'd, you know, do all that stuff. But there was wasteland attached to it, which was part of the Irish glass bottle factory. So there was all kinds of things to find and, you know, hills to climb, small hills to climb and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I suppose it was adventurous in a way. We wouldn't have described it as adventurous. It was just our playground.
Yeah, so look, when you're that age, like, you're having fun in the back garden. I was chatting to Robbie O'Raw there last week or the week before in the podcast, and I know we used to train with him, you and I, and he was telling me about starting a snail farm. So, you know, that's the thing when you're a kid, you come up with all kinds of stuff to keep you entertained.
Yeah, I mean, we used to come, and there was all these kind of castles of lumps of glass sitting down there from the glass bottle factory, and kind of ornate things. And I'd come home every second day with another lump of glass, you know, telling my dad, "Oh, here's another ornament, or here's something for the garden," you know. So yeah, it was just great fun. It really was, you know, because where we lived was on the main road, so, you know, there was quite a bit of traffic there. But it was pretty innocent, James, to be honest with you. You know, it really was. Dump the school bags and be gone for hours on end and come home when it was dark. Nobody really knew where you were or what you were doing, and it was all very innocent.
Wicked. And who inspired you growing up, man?
My dad is a huge influence in my life, or was a huge influence in my life. Sadly, he passed away in 2017, but, like, definitely my hero. You know, growing up, he was a really, really serious sportsman. He was just one of those guys who was annoyingly successful at anything he turned his hand to. That was a huge influence. You know, he was a really, really successful athlete. He was a successful soccer player, and he was very competitive, you know, and that's rubbed off. You know, he wasn't really one for, as an adult, taking part. He was kind of taking parts for kids. And, you know, he'd have this old saying, first is first, second is nowhere, you know. So, and he was very encouraging in terms of getting involved and participating in sports, being outdoors, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, my hero.
First is first, second is nowhere. Like, would you look at that in a purely positive sense, or did you feel a lot of pressure with that, or?
So, like, in school, I would have played a bit of Gaelic football in primary school, then a bit of soccer and a little bit of rugby in secondary school. To be honest with you, I was never really very good. I wasn't physically strong. You know, I was a bit of a beanpole in those days. But he never put me under undue pressure and saying, you must, and you're useless or anything like that. He was very encouraging. He'd be always on the sideline, but he was fiercely competitive. Like, there's just no doubt about it. You know?
Yeah. Cool, man. I kind of know your story, man, because we were in Peru together, you know, but like many people, like in your late teens, early 20s, you kind of moved away from being active and going out on adventures, and you started hitting the pub and chasing women. Like, Talk to me about that time and leading up to when you got married and had kids and all that. What was going on at that stage of your life?
Yeah, I suppose to give that some context. So when I was about 11 or 12, I joined the Scouts.
Yeah.
And I joined a troop called 24th PBO, which was based in the Scout Association of Ireland's headquarters at the back of Leeson Street, as it was in the time, which was a bit from home. And my dad got me involved in there. And it was amazing. I loved every minute of it. And, you know, obviously there's some not great news around scouting around at the moment, but my experience of the Scouts was just unbelievable. And I was very lucky that the troop I was involved in, the leaders were all about taking us out of the den and going into the outdoors. So we'd go hiking, night hikes, you know, they'd take us away in camps. And so I really, really loved that. Every single minute of it. It was an amazing experience. And then hit 17, 18. Yeah, you have a few beers, then you have a few more beers, and then you have a lot more beers, you know, just doing different things. And kind of fell in love with a childhood sweetheart whose name is Helen, who's now my wife of almost 30 years.
Congrats, man. Fair play.
And all that goes with that. And so I suppose just drifted away from the outdoors, really. Just life led us in a different direction. We had kids at a pretty young age. I think I was 24, 25 when Killian, who's now 27, was born. Yeah, so the outdoors kind of went out of the equation, really. A buddy of mine, we signed up for a charity trek, which was big news at the time. And there was lots of charity treks going on around that time to go and climb Kilimanjaro for the Dublin Simon community. And we did that in we signed up in February 2006. And then I suppose in March or April, we kind of realized, oh my God, what have we done here? Maybe a party sounds better. We better get our asses in gear and do a bit of training, etc. So we went off in October 2006. And ever since then, I've been back on the hills as often as I can.
Amazing, man. Yeah, that's I love that story about you and your buddy, like going feck it, like after a few beers, like we're going to Kilimanjaro, like yay. And it
really was like that, James. Like, I mean, I didn't have a pair of hiking boots at the time, you know, and then looking at the itinerary and going, oh, Jesus, like this isn't a stroll in the Phoenix Park. This is real here, you know. And I suppose the competitive nature in me as well was, you know, let's get ready for this and let's do this properly, you know. So it was an amazing trip. I would say, you know, I've heard you talk in other podcasts about life-changing experiences, and I would never overplay it, but that was definitely one for me. I learned so much about myself and other people. It was just amazing. And Africa's an amazing place. Amazing.
Like, what's your top, like, I know there's so many, but like off the top of your head, man, what's your biggest takeaway from that Kili trip? Back in 2007 or 8, you were saying, yeah?
2006, yeah. Okay. So it's quite a while, 15 years ago now. I suppose the one thing I would take from it was myself and Pat went out with the view that no matter what happens, we were going to get to the summit, and kind of forget everybody else. And this is our trip. And yeah, we'll be nice and polite, but we'll do our own thing. Within 24 hours, that just went out the window. You know, we didn't know what long drops were. We didn't know. We hadn't camped in years. You know, the way I would describe that trip is I made friends for life at that time, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, man, because myself and other guides, we'd always be wary of young, fit males, you know, fellas in their early 20s with like that kind of like, we're going to the top, no worries. Like, you know, we won't tell you if we've got a headache or any kind of altitude sickness. You're always keeping an eye on them. But it's interesting you guys still had that mentality at 40. Like, you know, it's not just an age thing. It's a lack of experience thing and something you learn over time. You know, I think that's really interesting. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But come here, you caught the bug then, man, and you went on to do a ton of other trips. Like I asked you to send me on a list, like Patagonia, Morocco, Spain, Namibian desert in Africa, Morocco, like Sierra Nevada in Spain. You did Everest Base Camp with those. And the trip I wanted to ask you about, I don't know if you've noticed this, you've been listening to the podcast, is Kenya Try Adventure, because everybody's been like, oh man, this is the best trip going. You know, you got to go to Kenya. But I know you had a good experience, but it was very different. You guys had a lot of rain. Yeah. Talk to me about that.
A lot of rain, understatement of the century. Yeah, I mean, look, it was a great trip. And I know some people who signed up to go with you this year and they were asking about it. And I was saying, like, look, it's the best trip ever. And it is the best trip ever. I suppose our experience of it was we arrived all good. We're all in good form. We start our first day hiking. The sun is shining, as you would expect in Africa. We see the guides having a chat with each other that looked a little bit ominous. And for the 4 or 5 days we were on the mountain, it was monsoon. I mean, it was just rained all day, every day. You know, the tents were soaking wet, the gear was soaking wet, everything was just, so it was tough, you know, like it really was tough. And on the summit day, again, you don't expect to be walking in a snowstorm in Africa, really. And we left the camp about midnight or whatever it was. Not everybody decided to go because some people were just worn out by the whole thing. And we were about 100 meters or so from the summit, and it really was tough and dodgy. And John Healy and Sarah Phelan were their guide and doctor, and Julius, the local guys, were just amazing. And we called it quits. So we were pulled off the mountain about 100 meters from the top, which was absolutely 100% the right thing to do, in my opinion. So that day for us turned out to be a 17 or 18-hour day. It was really, really tough. And then when we got out of that, we had great weather again to finish with in terms of the cycling and the whitewater rafting. So it's a great trip. But I think, one of the things I'd say, and I go back to this on all of my trips, I mean, that trip was challenging because of the weather, but what got us through it was the camaraderie in the group.
Yeah.
We just had such a laugh. We were telling stupid jokes, stories, singing songs, whatever it was, because it was hard work. And I think, that was certainly one of those trips where if the group dynamic wasn't great, it could have been difficult for everybody. But, loved it.
I think like all the listeners, vast majority are living in Ireland, so we're used to rain, especially hiking in the rain. But I think the significant difference is when you get that kind of consistent rain for 5 days non-stop. Like when it rains in the Irish Hills and you get soaked, you come home, you have a shower, you put on dry clothes. Like what the big difference there is, you're camping and it's so much rain. A lot of your stuff in your duffel can get wet unless you've got really good gear, like which, some of us guides have, or some clients, but like a lot of people, like they're shattered after a day, they're soaked wet, and you get into your tent, the rest of your gear is wet, like soaked, and you're going to sleep in sub-zero conditions, man. It's like...
And then when you get up the following morning, it's all still wet.
Yeah, and there's a pool of water in your tent.
I remember, there was one place on that trip, we got actually to the campsite before the local dudes because the weather was so bad. So we arrived before the tents. And we were hanging around and it was freezing cold and everybody's tired and wet and, getting a little bit anxious and a little bit angsty with each other. And then the tents arrive and the guys do a great job getting the tents up quickly. And then they're wet, and you're going, oh, Jesus, but like, you have to get on with it, and you have to try and laugh about it. And I remember when we got to the campsite after the summit, it was in the safari park or the national park. And the guys had a lovely fire. They were trying out all our gear for us. They took out a few beers and all of that pain was very quickly forgotten, and the conversation went on to make sure you don't get out of your tent in the middle of the night because there's likely to be a hippo walking through the campsite, so you do forget the pain very quickly,
you do, man.
But yeah.
No, it's so true. I was on a trip in January 2019, a big team. We're climbing Kilimanjaro for the IRFU Charitable Trust, and we had Marcus Horan and Shane Byrne and Mike McCarthy and Stephen Ferris on the trip. And man, it rained every day, and I was obviously working, like I was head guiding out like 30 clients and a team of over 100 local staff, and I was just basically there going, you know what, guys, it's going to be sunny tomorrow. I can feel it, just buzzing, like keeping it real confident. And then you get back in, I was in a tent by myself and I was getting in there and there was a pool of water at the bottom of the tent and I was just like, feck this, man. Why didn't I become like an accountant or something? I was just like,
I remember on the Kenya trip going, oh Jesus, those feckers in there, they just pick the cheapest weeks when they know the weather's going to be miserable. You have to roll with it though. I mean, and that's the thing, and I know all of the guys, we still stay in touch. Most of us, I've been on some trips with the guys afterwards, and we still look back in that trip, huge fond memories.
Deadly. Let's take a break there for some quick fire questions. What was your first job?
Working in a video shop.
What song is always on your workout playlist?
I never listen to music when I'm working out, but I'm a big Springsteen fan. He's my go-to person. I've seen him live about 35 times at this stage.
Wow, incredible, man. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Icarus, actually the book of the movie, but I'm a terrible reader. It takes me about a year and a half to start and finish the book.
Oh, it's fascinating. I haven't read the book now, but I've watched the movie. If you were stranded on a mountain with one celebrity, who would it be?
Nelson Mandela.
Nice, yeah. What's your favourite food to eat on a mountain?
Two go-to things, a banana and a good old-fashioned ham sandwich.
Good man. What's your favourite piece of kit?
I'd say definitely my Mindle boots. I always use Mindle boots, the best.
What's your biggest pet peeve when traveling?
Queues queues to check in, queues for security, queues to get on the plane, queues to get off the plane, queues to get in the bus. I hate queuing.
Just want to get in the mountain. Yeah, I know that feeling.
Exactly.
If money wasn't a factor, what would you do all day?
Well, the easiest and obvious answer is travel, Oh, I don't know. I could see myself doing some charity work, to be honest, which I was involved in homeless charity in Dublin before, and that's important to me, I think, yeah.
Good man.
Working for a homeless charity and travel, I'd say.
Brilliant. Describe yourself in 3 words.
Passionate, loyal, and honourable.
Nice. Very good. After Kenya, you went on and did one of the hardest treks in Europe, a classic called the GR20 in the middle of August. So for anyone that doesn't know, it's one of the toughest routes in Europe. It's on Corsica in the Mediterranean. Tell me about that, man.
Yeah, so that's one of my not great trips, that's for sure. Came back and feeling fit and all that kind of stuff. Just had in my head I wanted to do something in Europe for a change. I just didn't really want to do, kind of long haul travel that year. Wanted to do something actually where my wife could come out afterwards and we have a bit of a holiday. So yeah, I had a look at the GR20. Yeah, toughest trek in Europe. A lot of people split it over 2 trips, north and south. I decided we'd have a cut at it in one fell swoop, which is about 2 weeks of really tough hiking. I think it's about, just short of 200k. There's about 12,000 meters of ascent from start to finish in it. Doing it in the height of summer is probably not a great idea as a starting point. And then when there's a heat wave on top of that, doesn't really help. So it didn't work out for me, it just didn't work out for me. And I was, I would say, instead of looking at others, we had a local guide from Corsica. He was a really nice guy. He knew the mountains inside out, but he just wasn't a great guide. And there was a group of about 10 of us who all met in the airport for the first time. And it was just, he tried to push us too hard. Nobody was enjoying it. People were getting through it, but nobody was enjoying it. And then in the middle of it, my feet just blew up. I just blistered all over the place. And we'd had an accident. A guy near the end of the day fell and busted his ankle, and we had to get him helicoptered off the side of the mountain. So there was lots of not good stuff going on. And I just said, look, I don't need this. I'm going to bail out of this for a few days and go to the beach. But I think then when I came back, I had a good look at myself. It's always easy to blame others, and the bottom line, James, was I wasn't fit enough. I was training, well enough, but I wasn't training hard enough. And I was kind of I plateaued, and it really blew my confidence when it came to hiking when I came back. I mean, we got back in end of August. I didn't hit the mountains in Wicklow until the winter. I just couldn't be arsed, to be honest with you. I just had no motivation to get up and put on the boots, even just to do something like joust. And, then I kind of said, cop yourself on. It's only a hike, get over it.
Why was that, man? Was it like a bit of an ego dent that you didn't finish it, or what? Like,
yeah, I was just really disappointed with myself, and I probably have that competitive streak from the family genes, if you like. And, I was looking around. I knew I was well able to do this, but I didn't put in the hard yards beforehand because it's a tough gig and you're carrying a lot of weight with you.
Yeah. And
it's really hot and it's just up all the time, So I said to myself, like, I'm too old for this. This just doesn't really make sense. And I really needed to get that confidence back, and I swore to myself that I was never going to let that happen to me again on a trip. I either wouldn't do the trip, or if I was doing a trip, I'd be ready.
Yeah.
I'd absolutely be ready,
But that's the thing, man. You probably learned more on that trip than had you done if you just about had the fitness and managed to finish it off, like you just learn so much from failure in every aspect of life. So
yeah, and I think I was lucky, that Helen came out and we had a lovely week on the beach afterwards. And Corsica is a beautiful, beautiful place, and the walk, or the trek could be absolutely beautiful. But I think just having that time to kind of look at it and reflect on it, and even though, as I say, I didn't hike for months afterwards, kind of always knew I was going to at some point in time. I was never going to not succeed because of fitness. Do you know what I mean? Other things you can't control or whatever. An interesting experience.
And hey, tell me this. What was your mood like the week of holidays with Helen afterwards? Were you in good form, or were you like a brer?
I was good. No, it was good. It was good. Like, Helen is usually supportive around all of this, and no, it was good. We stayed in a really nice hotel. The weather was good. We chilled out. We ate too much. We drank too much, all that nice stuff. Like, that support from home is really important because, I think, you go and do these trips yourself. But for me, if I didn't have the unequivocal support from home, they probably wouldn't happen because, I work hard during the week. I'm on the mountains most weekends, sometimes, every weekend. I'm in the gym 3 or 4 times a week. So it's selfish, you could argue, in one way. So if I didn't have that support from at home, just wouldn't do it, you know.
I'd say she's happy to see the back of you for a bit, like.
Well, you're allowed to say that. I'm not.
So, dude, after that trip in Corsica, we went to Peru together. We did the Machu Picchu and Choquequirao trek, which was,
Yeah.
if I do say so myself, an absolute cracking trip. Like, we had great cracking. It was just an epic trail. Like, I think it's fair to say you got the drawback for hiking and going on expeditions after that one.
I did, yeah. And I think, you know, like I'd had a look at the Machu Picchu trip before and had a look at your trip. I'd never heard of Choquequirao before, you know, talking to you guys. And man, what a trip that was, you know, and great bunch of people, you know, as always. But it was a tough trip, you know, and I think, you know, I remember the first 2 days were, you know, the first day of mad descent for 8 or 9 hours, you know, and then the next day of 8 or 9 hours up, you know. But walking into Choquequirao that will live with me forever. I mean, it's kind of had to be there to explain it, but, you know, somewhere that's similar in size to Machu Picchu, not as pristine, if you like. We were the only people there pretty much.
Yeah.
And, you know, I remember sitting under the tree when we went in and Edgar and the local guys, you know, passionately explaining the history of this place to us, taking us on a little tour, you know, taking us to a grave, you know, and explaining all about that and then letting us go off and wander on our own. I mean, I'm not really religious, to be honest with you, but that was a spiritual experience. It really was. And I think, you know, that kind of few minutes we took on our own, like it was just spiritual, emotional. It was just magical. It really was. And then walking around the following day or that day to come into the campsite on the Inca steps. I mean, you know, if you did campsites, I mean, my God, that was just very, very special.
It was,
you know,
amazing,
and
yeah.
Beautiful country, tough hiking, you know, great culture, great food, great local guides.
Great international guides as well, I have to say.
Sure, he was all right, you know.
No, it's actually funny, man. As you know, we do info talks in all our trips, and I was doing one last week in Machu Picchu, and like I'm talking to 60 or 80 people on Zoom, which is always an interesting experience, but like they're all on for a Machu Picchu talk. And basically I was on there going like, lads, I don't mean to be weird about it, but when you see Choquequirao and you experience that, you're going to be totally underwhelmed by Machu Picchu. And it's so true, isn't it? Like it isn't an amazing spot like Machu Picchu, but Choquequirao is it's just spiritual. Like, you know, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Like for me, there's no doubt that was the highlight of the trip. I mean, Machu Picchu was fantastic and it was great to see it. But to be honest with you, it's a bit like Disneyland getting in and out of it, isn't it? You know, there's so many people. And I remember, I think Mags was on that trip with us and she had talked about being in Aguas Calientes before and it was a little town. Now it's a little city, you know, so which is all fine. You know, that's tourism. It brings lots of money into the economy. Machu Picchu is great to go and see it. But Choquequirao is streets ahead.
Amazing.
Streets ahead.
And hey, question for you, like I redesigned that itinerary to make it tough, you know, what do you think? I tick that box?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, and you know, there were some of my friends on the trip. I think that was important for us. You know, for me going on the trips, there definitely has to be a challenge to it. You know, I don't really want to go on a package holiday. You know, I like package holidays, that's fine, but adventure tourism is different. And I think, you know, that was a tough trek. You know, it really was. You know, and I think, you know, some people struggle at times. I had from my previous experience in Corsica, I got myself into great shape, and I was very proud of myself. I felt I smashed it, you know. So
yeah, you were solid, man. So come here, after Peru, you and I went winter mountaineering with a group again to Scotland in March 2020. Actually, man, I remember you coming under a huge amount of pressure at the end of that trip. You nearly had to fly home. Like, can you tell the listeners as best you can on what you do and what your role is?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of the context to all that stuff that was going on in Scotland. So I work for a very large pharmaceutical wholesale and distribution company that also owns one of the largest retail pharmacy chains in Ireland. Okay. And that was, I think, around the first or second week in March last year. And by God, what a year it's been since then. But when we were heading over to do the winter mountaineering in Scotland, it was kind of beginning to kick off in here, you know, all things COVID related. And if you remember, James, the phone signal wasn't brilliant where we were, which kind of turned out to be a good thing, to be honest with you. Because when I came back, you know, oh my God, had it hit the fan, you know, I remember, I think we flew back on the Thursday evening, and we were sitting in Glasgow airport, and you wouldn't really know that there was kind of a pandemic coming, to be honest with you. And my boss rang me and said, well, when are you due back? And I said, oh, I'm tired, man. It's been a long week. I'll see you on Monday. He says, no, I need you here at 9 a.m. And I went, okay. And I'd been sending the guys some photographs of Ben Nevis and all the snow and all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering why nobody was coming back. And quite frankly, it just was mayhem here. And I mean, I suppose lessons learned in the first wave of the pandemic, everybody went nuts. It was a bit like the bread and the snow a few years ago. We simply couldn't keep up with the demand for volume. So people were looking for 6 months prescriptions. The hospital wanted to buy 2 years stock, all that kind of stuff. And we just couldn't cope, and we'd extra vans and all that kind of stuff. And that went on for about 6 weeks, and we were just on the floor, and then it just stopped. So from mid-April all the way through the end of May, we did nothing. So our business went from being really up at Mount Everest levels to be down at sea level. And it was and it's been that roller coaster since, to be honest with you. But like everything in life, you learn how to deal with these things as you go on, So we're almost a year into it now. I think, look, as I said at the start, everybody's got a bit of lockdown fatigue. We are one of the many stakeholders trying to support the Department of Health and the HSE in trying to help us get us out of this mess, particularly when it comes to vaccines,
But I think, man, if you're listening to like RTE, like our national broadcaster here in Ireland in the morning, it's so negative. Like I think, what's your perspective? I think it seems to be going pretty good. Like, on the whole.
Yeah, I think. Look, there's so much of managing the message and all that sort of stuff goes on. I think, for those of us who are living it every day. Look, I'm optimistic by nature, but I'm definitely hopeful in terms of where we're at. I think, knowing what I know, with more vaccines to come through and supplies to come in, I think, we definitely have reason to be optimistic that over the next weeks and months, we're going to see significant proportion of the population vaccinated once and twice. And, this will end, and, it will end slowly, but it will end. I think, we've got to be hopeful. But the opposite to hope is despair. That doesn't really bear much thinking about.
No, not at all. So come here, you and I are hoping to go climb Kangyatsy to 6,250 meters in Ladakh in northern India this August. What do you reckon, man? Hand on heart, what are our chances of getting out there with the pandemic?
Look, if you'd have asked me the question a couple of weeks ago, I actually probably would have been more optimistic than I am now, which sounds contradictory. I think from an Irish perspective, I think by August we'll be in a good place. I think the concern is in the developing countries, what kind of state are they in, So realistically, 50-50, I'd say. And that's me being optimistic, as well, because it's important for me to have something to look forward to. I know you guys are doing a trip to Mira Peak in October, I think it is. That's my backup plan, if you like. And I'm very optimistic about that, Like last year, we were supposed to get to Kangyatsy last year. And obviously that came and went. I decided to do some different things in Ireland. Like there's always something to do. I did, myself and a buddy of mine did the Wicklow Way, the full Wicklow Way, which we'd never done before. That was great fun, gave us something to aim for. I did the Dublin Mountain Way and all in one day. So there's loads you can do at home to keep you ticking over, but there's nothing beats the away trip, I
know. I'm hoping to do a 100k ultra run later on this year. That's my backup plan if I don't get to go to Amada Blam or Kangyatsy. So you just gotta, what can you do? You gotta roll with it, man. It's outside your control.
You've got to roll with it, and you've got to be optimistic. And for me, just having some kind of focus in front of me keeps me motivated to hit the gym when the gyms are open, or hit the hills or whatever it is, because otherwise you just sit at home and feel miserable.
Absolutely. Talk to me about your training. Like, what's a typical week for you? Like,
I would hit the gym. I think before the Peru trip, I would spend 2 or 3 nights a week in kind of a conventional gym doing my own thing. And I think that was part of the issue with Corsica. I just kind of plateaued. So when I came back from Peru, at your recommendation, I joined up with Andy Myers and the guys down in the movement studio in Terranure, which is great. It's been great for me, to be honest with you. I mean, if you said to any of my mates or family that Stephen O'Donoghue will get up at 6 a.m, 4 mornings a week to go to a gym, they just think you're off your trolley, and I've just got into that routine, and what I found with something like that that's kind of class-based is I can see and feel progression. During the summer, I'd go to the hills, from home, I'd be up around Ticknock, 2 or 3 nights a week. When I'm training specifically for something, I tend to stick to a couple of routes that I know easily, and because they kind of allow me gauge whether I'm getting fitter or not. And I do a lot of hiking on my own, and I enjoy that. That gives me good headspace. So mixture of the gym and on the hills, nothing beats hiking for hiking, doesn't it?
So come here, when you say you're by yourself, you're out there with your dog Alfie. How's he getting on?
Alfie's the main man. So Alfie is, I'll probably upset a load of people by saying Alfie's my best mate, but Alfie is a 9-year-old chocolate Labrador who I love dearly. And he loves the mountains. He's gas. You know, he'll know when it's Saturday because he'll come into the bedroom and he'll stand at the end of the bed waiting for me to put some gear on. And then he starts hopping around like a fly, you know. And if there's a time where I don't bring him, he just looks out the window and sulks for 4 hours. But he loves the mountains. You know, look, he needs his exercise. It's great, you know. If I'm feeling pretty crap about something or the headspace isn't great, I'll talk to Alfie for 4 or 5 hours and he never answers back. It's amazing, you know. And look, I'm a dog. You know, the unconditional love that you get back from the dogs, you know, is amazing. You know, so no, I love going hiking with Alfie, and he loves it too.
Yeah, I really miss having a dog, man. I totally get it. You know, they're so easy going. Like they're like, if you say like, hey, do you want to do Logan Aquila today? Or they're like, yeah, cool. Whatever you're thinking, man. You know, I'm good to go wherever you want. You know, you don't know any issues about what time you're leaving or anything like that. They're just like, yeah, cool, yeah, dude. You call the shots in this one.
Exactly, and even lunch just fits into your pocket with a handful of treats. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So no, it's great, and he loves it as well, and he needs the exercise. So yeah, it's cool.
So hey, before I let you go, man, what would your top tip for someone listening who's never done an expedition before? So maybe somebody else coming up to their 40th birthday party, and they're like, do you know what? Actually, I'd like to go and like that guy in the podcast, Stephen, there, do it, Killy. Like, what would you be saying to that person? Like,
the first thing I would say is if you're thinking about it, you're halfway there to making the decision. Just do it. Just sign up. Because if you think about it too much, you overthink it, you can actually talk yourself out of it. And that would be, you'd really miss out, I think, by talking yourself out of it. Second thing I would say is, I think it's really worthwhile spending the time to get yourself in as best physical shape as you can. When you're on the trip, don't overthink it. Take each day on its own merits. I think, you know, certainly when for my first couple of trips, it was all about thinking about that summit day or the last day, you know. I think if you take each day on its own merits, you'll get to the summit eventually, or that summit day will come, but you won't have lost out on enjoying everything that you see and experience on the trip as you go through it. So there's 3 tips. To anybody who's thinking about it, just go and do it. You know, outdoor trips have become a huge part of my life now. It's great for the head. It's great for the body. Going to all of these countries in the world, experiencing it in a way that most people never get to do, is really something special. So just go and do it.
Awesome. Thanks a million for coming on, man. Great to chat to you. Hope to see you in person soon.
Absolutely. Pleasure's all mine.
This podcast was produced by Earth's Edge. We're a small business based in Ireland who organise big adventures all over the world. For more information about us and the trips discussed on this podcast, visit earths-edge.com or follow us on Instagram. Don't forget to sign up to our mailing list to be in the running to win one of our summit jackets. There's a link in the show notes. And while you're there, if you could subscribe and review the podcast, that'd be brilliant. I'm your host, James McManus. Thanks for listening and have a super week.